Now that Islam Makhachev is the new undisputed UFC lightweight champion, what's next? The great plan for Islam Makhachev by his late coach, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, was to win the UFC lightweight title and carry on the legacy of the Eagle, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Now Islam Makhachev has the title, but to carry on that legacy, he's ready to step into the belly of the beast to face probably the most relentless and technically proficient fighter in the UFC, Alexander Volkanovski, at UFC 284. We know that no matter the circumstance, Alexander Volkanovski never gives up. So can Volkanovski put an early end to this great plan for Islam Makhachev? Or will Islam once again prove to us that he truly is the best and the rightful #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world? Well, there's only one way to find out, so sit back and let's talk about the possibilities of this fight. Immediately after Islam Makhachev won the title, Khabib Nurmagomedov called out Alexander Volkanovski to face Islam for his first title defense in Australia. And look, if you're confused as to why Volkanovski is even considered the next lightweight title contender, well, the answer boils down to the fact that Volkanovski was the backup fighter for the Oliveira-Makhachev fight at UFC 280, so it only seems fair that he's the next in line for the title. And coupled with the fact that there's really nothing much left for Volkanovski to do at the featherweight division. Now let's sit back for a second and draw this fight out on paper to see the possibilities of either Makhachev or Volkanovski winning. The first factor in this fight is the size difference. Obviously, all Volkanovski needs to do is eat as much as he can, but the truth is, Islam Makhachev will still have the weight advantage. We saw how gassed out Makhachev looked at the last weigh-ins, so it's pretty obvious he's a very big lightweight fighter. And on the other hand, making the 150 to 155 pound weight requirement would be a totally different feeling for Volkanovski. His first fight in the UFC was at lightweight, and that was like 7 years ago. So fighting at lightweight again would be kinda like a new feeling for Volkanovski. He might be slower since he'll be heavier and maybe even have less endurance to go the full 5 rounds, cause again, he'll be way heavier than he normally is. Another factor that comes into play is the current betting odds. The current betting odds for the fight show that Makhachev has a 77% chance of winning. So if we were to break down the reason why that figure is so high, it would lean towards the fact that Islam Makhachev's wrestling is enough to end the fight very early in maybe round 2 or 3. Islam's wrestling? No, not even Islam alone, but Dagestan wrestling, as a whole, is just on another level. We don't need to go into the details, but Islam's wrestling skills will definitely be the main threat to Volkanovski. And if you look at things from a different angle, the only weakness we've seen from Makhachev was back in 2015 when he faced Adriano Martins at UFC 192. Makhachev recorded his first ever career loss that night, so as far as this fight goes, the surest way for Volkanovski to end the fight is to knock Makhachev out. Getting a submission will be tough, because, it's Islam Makhachev we're talking about here. And besides, Volkanovski's last submission win was way back in 2015 at Pacific Extreme Combat 50. So it's pretty clear Volkanovski might not be considering going to the ground, but if he can pull off a remake of his fight against the Korean zombie Jung Chan-sung, where he sent a fury of punches to knock out Chang-sung in the first few seconds of the 4th round, then maybe he can be the man to kill the dream of the great Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov. But the real question is, can Volkanovski really pull this off? His record suggests he actually can, because this guy has run through the very best in the featherweight division and he's still on top. Yes, Islam is no ordinary fighter that can easily get run over. His wrestling is probably the best on the UFC roster right now, but it doesn't take away the fact that Volkanovski doesn't quit. That might sound very absurd, but it's the truth. And let's say for 1 second you don't believe what we just said. Let's say you don't believe that Volkanovski just can't tap out. Well, the best way to prove this to you is to take you back to his fight against Brian Ortega at UFC 266. The first thing you need to know about this fight is that Brian Ortega is a big featherweight and is obviously bigger than Volkanovski. The next thing you need to know is that Volkanovski found himself in probably the most trouble he's ever been in throughout his career. Somewhere in the 3rd round, Ortega caught Volkanovski with a straight left hand, took him down to the canvas, and locked him in a very tight guillotine choke. There's no way any fighter alive could have come out from that choke. Volkanovski's head was locked, his legs were locked, and there was simply no way out. But like we said, the guy just doesn't quit. In a moment when the entire arena thought he was going to tap out, Volkanovski broke out of the hold and got back on top. Ortega once again tried to get a triangle choke in the same round, but Volkanovski still pulled out and managed to win the fight via unanimous decision. But if you're still not convinced, then take another look at his 3 fights with Max Holloway to see the extent this guy can go. But on the other hand, Islam Makhachev is a monster once he steps foot inside that octagon. As good as Volkanovski is, we can't deny the fact that Makhachev might be the man to end his win streak. Many fans doubted just how good Makhachev was until he finished Oliveira at UFC 280. And if for 1 second you choose to look past his fight with Oliveira, you'd see that Makhachev has some really good executions in his career as well. His fights against Drew Dober, Dan Hooker, Bobby Green, and Thiago Moises all point to his dominance as a fighter. And aside from their skill sets in the octagon, there's more on the line than just the UFC lightweight title. These guys are the only 2 fighters left in the UFC with a winning streak above the 10-figure mark, so if either fighter wins, they would automatically become the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Now let's take things to a higher level. What if Volkanovski actually wins? What's next for him in both the lightweight and the featherweight divisions? Well, first off, the world might be so shocked that they decide to book a rematch between the 2 of them during the summer of 2023. And if they don't do that, the UFC might put Volkanovski against the winner of the speculated fights between Dustin Poirier and Beneil Dariush, or Poirier versus Oliveira. But if that doesn't happen, then Volkanovski might face the winner between Yair Rodriguez and Josh Emmett at UFC 284 for the 5th title defense of his UFC featherweight title. But the truth is, if Volkanovski wins, it automatically places him in the status of the GOATs, because he'd have simply done it all. And if Islam wins, that would be an entirely different story on its own. Not only will he become the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, but he'll also begin his journey to plaster his name right beside his mentors, Khabib Nurmagomedov, as the greatest fighter to ever cross the UFC lightweight division. So if Makhachev wins, he might get a rematch against Charles Oliveira, even though for some reason that fight doesn't seem all too appealing right now. But at the same time, there would be more interesting fights for Islam Makhachev against Beneil Dariush, Dustin Poirier, or maybe even Justin Gaethje. You can't rule anyone out. But we think Makhachev would be more interested in a Beneil Dariush fight, given the fact that both fighters were scheduled to fight in February 2022, but eventually got canceled due to Dariush sustaining an injury. But everything still boils down to February 12, 2023, at the RAC Arena in Perth, Australia, where Islam Makhachev and Alexander Volkanovski would fight for the UFC Lightweight Championship, and also fight for who will become the new #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. So who do you think will win? Let us know in the comments section down below. But once you're done there, you might want to check out either video shown on your screen right now. They're both awesome, so click on one and I'll see you there.